Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ground podcast. So, the first topic is a bit sad, but it is very important to talk about. So, Vedant, you must be knowing about Brij Bhushan and what he did in the wrestling world, and how Sakshi Malik, who is a bronze medalist for India in Olympics, had to give away her medal for media attention for getting the case somewhere to the courts. And finally, after all this, the court has announced that he will be charged um, sexually for sexually assaulting five wrestlers. So this does not mean that he will be jailed or something. It's not a sentence. It's just a charge based on the evidence that was provided. So it's now basically a case, an official case. He doesn't have to be in jail. He will be outside and he will be pleading his case in front of a judge, and then we will be deciding whether he will get a sentence, what sentence will he get. He may even just stall the case so much that maybe we won't even get to a sentence, because you know how men in power in India do things. But what I want to talk about is, and initial my first initial reaction was again about the current regime of BJP and stuff. But I think what we shouldn't forget is that there are real lives that matter, and those have been affected. We only know the story of Sakshi Malik because she came forward, but there are other four wrestlers who have gone through the same. Plus, they also said that the assistant manager was also doing the same thing. So it was very difficult. It was a journey that had to make a wrestler, someone who has represented our country internationally, give up what they dream of. Basically, you give up what you have dreamt of your whole life and then achieve something. She said that it's a small step towards a victory, because she understands, Sakshi Malik understands, that this is a very small step. There's not a victory. But yeah, it's a very sad state of things that a sports person in India who has represented the country has to go all through this. I have few more things, but I would like to come to you and just ask what was your reaction for all of this.
So yeah, I mean, honestly, when all of this was happening in real time, there was not much support from other people for the wrestlers. Like they themselves, I think they started around in January last year, where all of them came and just announced all of this, whatever has happened, and then this entire protest started. So my initial reaction, of course, I was pretty happy that finally something uh, has happened in this case. But when I read up about it, and as you rightly mentioned that these are just charges, the charges are yet to be framed. They'll be framed on 21st May. Then the case will begin. And as we all know, what happens when men in power go to the courts, or people who want justice go to the courts, what usually happens. So we don't need to get into much of detail for that. So that is something for later. But as of now, when like when all of this was happening, my initial uh, thoughts were that, of course, everyone from BJP, the Prime Minister, the Home Minister, and everyone are supposed to advocate for female rights and advocate for women empowerment, were all defending this guy. All of them were silent. But that again, I can pretty much understand because they can't go against someone from their own party, and BJP is not exactly someone who you can expect the right things from. But I was expecting more from our mainstream sportsmen. Like, when I was researching about this, when I saw who actually spoke up about this, it was Neeraj Chopra, it was Abhinav Bindra, it was our world boxing champion Nikat Zareen, it was our football stars Baichung Bhutia, Sunil Chhetri, and it was our retired cricket players Harbhajan Singh, Anil Kumble, I think it was Kapil Dev, and it was Irfan Pathan. These were the only players who spoke up about this. Now, I can understand that, we expect a lot from cricket players or Bollywood actors when it is completely their choice on what they choose to speak upon and everything and blah, blah, blah. We cannot force them and all. But when it is someone from your own community, from someone from sports, when someone is going through something that you yourself or female cricketers can go through this exact same thing, I I'm not saying it should happen, but it can happen. It when you are also under that same danger, then I think you should be at least speaking up about them, not going against the person who is accused. And then at that point, I was like, "Ki, man, what exactly is going on? No one is actually even caring about this. Like, even if our own these guys who we worship, cricket is considered as a religion here. If they themselves cannot speak up, then can we actually expect any real action or justice from the authorities? Because, like, all of this, when it started, it was pretty much in the news, but then eventually people moved on. The World Cup happened, the IPL started, and no one seemed to care about it until when this decision from the court came. So that was my initial when I was researching about it. This is what I was, pretty much concerned about. Like, how much are we ourselves concerned about our own female wrestlers when they actually when they were manhandled by the police, and when they had to put their medals away, as you say, when Sakshi Malik had to quit wrestling because in the re-elections, Brij Bhushan's right-hand man himself got re-elected as the president. And when all of these wrestlers had to take some such extreme measures, it was pretty much a depiction of where sports in India currently stands in the political context of things.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of this today, that actually no one from the cricketing world who is currently playing and have that kind of influence actually spoke up. And I don't know if it is fear of going against the ruling party or anything, but as you said, there is one angle that we can't expect sports people in sports to stand up because their main aim is to play sports. But I think that if common citizens, their aim is then, as if you look at them as sports person, sports people, then it's fine. But before you are a sports person, you are a citizen of India, right? So if we are raising our voices, or if we are at least talking about it, we can expect from a person who has this kind of influence like Virat Kohli or Rohit Sharma, but they didn't. So anyways, and they would, I don't think they will even speak up about these things, because even though we do have freedom, there are a lot of consequences to that freedom and voice of expression. And on obviously what ongoing series, they might not want to have that kind of pressure. But talking about the journey, as you mentioned, that getting manhandled by the police and stuff, so that journey toward justice is so difficult for India, for anyone in Indian sports, that I think I remember some media people talking about how giving away medals is just a PR stunt. And there was a, and a proof of how sometimes in this country we do victim shaming is, there was a rally that was arranged. I don't know if there was any political people behind them, but the wrestling community, the junior wrestlers, local wrestlers came together and they were protesting against Sakshi Malik and co for halting their progress that year. Which, all right, I can understand that they might have missed a lot of tournaments, which will then obviously hamper their Olympics dream, because once you are older, there is a lot of disadvantages to it. But then they were arguing or protesting against the wrong people. You should protest against the person in power, the president who has done all this, right? You should protest against the government or the court to do the decision, give the decision faster, so that you're affecting all these people, all these players. So give the decision faster. It doesn't make sense to actually say to the victim by saying that it's your fault that you have accused the person, it's your own matter. She didn't make a personal matter public, she made a public matter very public. So I think this all tells you that it's very difficult when you go to the grassroots level and try to speak up against someone. Even if you look at a very local thing in Pune itself, in our own city, when four clubs tried to uh, complain against the PDFA by saying that they're not hosting tournaments in a right way. I think it was in 2019. PDFA literally threw them out of the system. So these four clubs now don't play in the system, and they're and look, I've spoken with a lot of owners and players and stuff. I won't name them, obviously. I don't want them in trouble, but everyone says that the ecosystem is a sham. You just have to pay and you don't actually get that much football. The facilities are not that very good. So it's a reality for clubs they're fighting against, but they still had to take the axe because, again, there was no awareness. I think a lot of people still don't care about the politics and the systems behind sports. They want to see sports as an entertainment when they come home, or want to watch on the screen. In Europe and USA, it's much more serious. The Athletic actually reported on David Villa, where an intern at New York City FC uh, was kind of she was physically harassed by David Villa, and they told her story, and she complained, and like she complained to the club, but David Villa's agent didn't respond, and David Villa's season was over, and he was in Spain. But they at least published this story in a way that was very in depth, and they accounted for. They just didn't posted her side, but they actually went on and talked to some of the other victims, some of the club members, and then tried to make sense of the story. So it matters there. In India, I think it still doesn't matter that much to us, which it should, because then I now come to the bigger point, which we can discuss a bit briefly, that how politics has really ruined Indian sports. And I remember that few years ago, when I used to ask that why there's no Indian athlete who's competing against Usain Bolt, and I used to get these answers as, our climate and our geographical position actually limits us to compete at that level, which I believed as a naive young person. But then as you go on to research things, it's nothing like that. Anyone can become a very top player. Perhaps in some sense, you look at marathons where maybe you can differentiate the cultures and stuff. But other than that, geographical locations and anything doesn't give any reasonable argument to this. The only reason is that our sports systems are filled with politicians, people connected to politics, and I think it's because people in India like to be in power, because once they are in power, your life is very easy. So Praful Patel ruined Indian football for 20-21 years. He was a Congress political member. Then Kalyan Chaubey, we know his BJP ties. He's ruining Indian football right now. Jay Shah is in cricket. We had Sharad Pawar as BCCI president. We have even wrestling, like we are talking about it. President of the Wrestling Federation is a BJP member. So every party that comes in power wants their control in sports, that they have it for because maybe it's the money that come in sports and they want to have it for themselves. But the true reason is that you will never see an Indian athlete consistently performing at international levels like Australia and United States and UK and China and Korea do, because and Japan do, because Indian sports is filled with politics, and it's dirty, and it's very filthy.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with this. And I think the main part is about okay, you cannot separate sports from politics ever, as people like to pretend, like I'm not interested in politics and I only care about sports, but you cannot actually separate the two, right? They go hand in hand, and whether you like it or not, that is the reality, that is the ground reality. What I feel is that, if you can't separate it, if politics has to be involved in sports, then at least the face of the federation, or the guys leading, or the guys making the changes, or the guys doing the stuff at the top, at least those should be somewhat connected to the sport, somewhat with an understanding of what is good for the sport and how we can develop or create a sustainable ecosystem within the country, right from the grassroots level, right? That is where my Jay Shakalan Chobe, of course, he himself was a player earlier, but you cannot ignore his ties with any political party. Again, there's Jay Shah, then there's the Wrestling Federation, then there's the Badminton Association. Like, almost all federations in the country have a guy associated with a political party in the lead, which can be eliminated. Like, you can probably have political guys behind the scenes, but at least put the guys who are not affiliated with any political party but have been associated with that sport for the past few decades, know how the sport functions and know what is good for the sport. Because we have been seeing so many pointless things happening in even football, in cricket, which we ourselves from the ground level as normal citizens can look at that decision, read it once, and say, what is this? This is not going to impact the sport, or this is not going to help the development, or this is not going to help in nurturing talent. But it's just done. We know it's done for money. We know it's done to help these friends of theirs by these partnerships and everything, doing everything for money. We know how that functions. So I think that is where the main problem lies, that if you cannot separate politics from it, at least put the ones making the decisions, let them at least be. Like, for example, Baichung Bhutia or whoever in football, like someone we know who will work for the betterment of the sport, and someone we know that will actually give us, as you said, like uh, athletes or a team that consistently performs at the international level. Like, as common citizens, that's all we ask for. We do not care how much profit the federation makes. We do not care what sort of brand it is being associated with, who is the kid sponsorer. Like, okay, that's all good for the fancy details, but just give us a team that is consistently exceeding expectations on the international levels, and like just not letting the country down, which we have not seen and which we will not see for the foreseeable future, as long as this system is
Mhm.
in place. And
Yeah.
I think, like, just coming back to the even the wrestling thing, like the World Wrestling Federation or whatever it is called, they had like, just like AIFF, they had announced for the re-elections, right? Because of this entire Brij Bhushan saga. In that too, the elections were postponed. They had given a 45-day deadline, then the elections were postponed, and eventually, their Brij Bhushan's own guy, someone associated or someone very close associate was of him, was eventually elected. But when the deadline was missed for that period, Indian wrestlers had to play like Russia, like without a flag. They had to represent a neutral flag, which is embarrassing for any country, right? Because when whatever is happening in your country, when international federations, like we ourselves are embarrassed, but when international federations are expressing their disappointment, even the Olympic Committee said whatever is happening is wrong and everything, and still the situation is not changing, then that is the worst that can happen for any country's sporting industry or ecosystem, at least in my opinion. And even for these female wrestlers, imagine they started protesting in January 2023. They had to give away their medals. They had to go against the police. They had to consistently protest in public, like do those hunger strikes and everything, just for this decision, which does not even guarantee that the person will go in jail. Like, that is how difficult it is. That is how difficult it becomes when you get politicians into the ecosystem. Like, if you tell me, if this guy was just any ordinary person not affiliated with BJP or any political party, right? If this guy was just a former wrestler or someone who knew the industry, right? Of course, Whether he would have done this or not is another thing. But if that was the guy in power, then wouldn't the action have been taken very swiftly? Like, wouldn't BJP's so-called women advocates be speaking about this, and then all of this would have been wrapped up pretty quickly, right? Just because it was their own person, this justice was delayed. This is the problem. Get the politicians out of the system, and you will see a very prospering industry
Yeah,
for
yeah,
India.
exactly. And again, the efforts that were taken, like you said, these are just so unimaginable that it just feels like there's just no use to even talk about justice anymore, because it's been over an year and a wrestler has to give up everything. And people have, I have seen the comments and everything where they said that, again, the wrestler's not so pure, she's also kind of bullied young wrestlers and stuff. You know what, whatever that story is, but this story matters. And in contact sport, I have seen gymnastics practice where the coach has to touch young girls, even minors, obviously, because girls and boys train since they are like 8 to 9 years old. But the difference between coaching and bad touch which was taught to us. So you can't, whatever that person has done in previous career or whatever, they don't deserve this. You can't align justice in this way. So it doesn't matter what she has done and what other wrestlers have done to keep everyone at maybe local and young wrestlers out of Indian squad. It doesn't matter in this story. And I was just thinking also while you were talking, when you listen to podcasts, uh, or in Europe or in USA, people covering in those sports in those countries, you never really listen to them talking about politics because it's not really that connected. But in India, before you criticize the players, if you're a smart fan, you already know the bigger problems are in the system. So I was thinking, like, should we do it? It's a sports podcast, we should talk about something sports and related to players. It does it even matter if you're talking about this, because it's more of politics and other stuff. But maybe this does matter because the system is at fault here more than the players right now. If the system was very pure and then the players were defaulting and not really playing that well, we should talk about them. It doesn't make sense for us to talk about the tactics of the Indian football team against Kuwait and against Qatar, which they are going to play next month, which are a do or die for us. If we don't win, obviously we go out and don't qualify for the third round. But it makes no sense for us, right, to talk about the tactics, because we know that these players are not capable of handling those complex tactics against a team like Qatar, who is obviously the Asian Cup winners. So that's why we can't really start with that. We have to somehow cover this as well as cover that. So yeah, that was what I was thinking. And yeah, I think we've talked about it a lot. I didn't want to go and talk about the entire story because I think a lot of information is anyways available and people can read about
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
I'll try to add some links to the sources as well in the description. But yeah, though your opinion was quite interesting about the other players also not speaking up. So that's it for this episode. I think we had few more topics, but we'll cover them afterwards. This was enough, I think, to take home. And with this podcast, Vedant, just wanted to tell you that I am hoping that we do it every week and try to cover a lot of sports and not just cricket and football. Although we might lean towards football and cricket a bit because more people watch that, and do some interviews because Puneri Paltan captain, the interview which we did with him got around 17,000 views. That means that people want to, watch these interviews. And I can say that our questions were very different than the other questions. So we didn't ask him how did you feel about being the captain. We actually asked him about how it was difficult for him to settle in Mumbai, coming from a very small village. What is the difference between him in the village while practicing and now a captain of a franchise? So he's spoken about a lot of things. He's also said that how he helps his village people, and the point that I really love about achieving everything but then going back to your community and giving them the opportunity you didn't get. So he's doing that. He shared all that. So do watch it, and we'll try to get more interviews done as well. So thank you, Vedant, for being here. Any last words for this episode?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just probably I love this initiative that you have taken, not just for uh, cricket or football, but for other sports as well, where we just get together and talk about not about India played Kuwait, our position was 29%, no, but actually what exactly goes on behind the scenes and what the situation, the ground reality is in sports, and some things that people may not want to discuss about, but some uncomfortable conversations probably. But yeah, it's just refreshing. I mean, don't take it in the wrong way. It's not refreshing to talk about such bad things
Yeah,
happening in the
yeah, I get that.
ecosystem, but it's just refreshing to at least hear someone speak up about it and not let it go unnoticed. That's just what I really am. I mean, I appreciate about this podcast, and I hope that we do try to this whatever we are talking about does go to a lot of people. I'm not saying we have to influence their opinions, but just spreading some awareness and just giving people some knowledge about what they may not know is our goal or my personal goal with this. Yeah.
All right, we will have Vedant for sure in the next couple of episodes. Till then, if you like our videos, do subscribe. And all right, we'll meet next time.